Good evening, everyone. I'm Fanta, the Vice President for Campus Life and Inclusive Excellence. To all of our families who are joining us from near and far, welcome to our webinar about the Fall 2020 updates. And I know we have families who are here in the US as well as abroad, so we really appreciate you making time. And for some of us, it is the evening. For some of you, it is the afternoon or maybe even early morning. I'm joined this evening, at least for us, by President Sylvia Burwell, as well as my colleagues, Jessica Waters from Academic Affairs, Jonnel Clothier from our AU Central Office, and Shirleyne McDonald, who is with our Financial Aid Office. We will be joined also a little bit later by Dr. David Reitman, our Medical Director for our Student Health Center, and some other colleagues. So we very much appreciate your time, and we've been fielding a lot of your questions, and we know that there are lots of questions coming from you. And so we want to really take this time to answer as many of them as possible, knowing that there will be other webinars during the next couple of weeks. And so to get us started, we felt that it was perhaps important for President Burwell to perhaps set the context for this evening conversation and discussion by going over the decision and the context for the decision. President Burwell.
So welcome, and thank you all for making time to join us, whatever time of day it is for you. Also really want to thank you for your patience and your support. As a parent myself, for us, our new parents, there are many of our parents of other students are here, but some of our new parents may not know that Stephen and I are parents to a 10 and a 12-year-old. And while we know what's happening for one of our children, we don't know for the other, and the uncertainty and what that means for families and planning and for supporting your children in terms of this challenging time for all of us. So really do want to express my appreciation and our appreciation for your patience and support during what is a challenging time in so many ways for all of us. And I know so many of you parents out there, there are challenges professionally in terms of everyone's work. There are challenges from a health perspective and the uncertainty and challenges there, and our personal lives with our family. And it's whether you're children, or I know many of you also engage in helping and supporting your parents and other members of your family too. So want to just begin by thank you for that patience and support. I wanted to join, and I apologize I can't stay for the full session, but wanted to join to talk a little bit about our decision and the decision-making process, because I think that's important for us to make sure we're expressing and communicating and transparent about. And I think you all know that throughout all of COVID-19 and all the decisions that we've made to date, there have been three fundamental principles that have guided us. And the first is the health and safety of our AU community. And that is number one, and that is the core gating factor for all decisions. Number two is how we excel against our mission. And our mission is what we're doing to support your students in their educational journey. And we know that's a journey that's curricular and academic and co-curricular, especially for those of you who are, and the majority of folks on this call are our parents of our undergraduates. And so that mission, how do we achieve in whatever context excellence against that mission and the AU way in terms of deep engagement of our community with our students, which is something that we believe is extremely important. And then the third principle is the idea of what American University, how it behaves and contributes to the broader community, and that's both here in the Washington, D.C. area, but more broadly. And so those principles have guided us throughout. And they guided us to our AU Forward Plan, which there are folks that I see on this in particular that have joined me here who have spent all-nighters getting us to the place of how to plan those classes, to do that blended learning, to how to make sure that we were bringing students back in a safe way in terms of residential living. And we were working very hard to implement that plan. But as we saw in a post-July 4th period, and it takes the 10-day, 14-day period to really see that acceleration of cases that we started seeing in July. We continued to see that up ramp, and then we saw a very high peak in those cases. There were a number of factors that changed over the period of time that led to our decision of what was a change, and a very disappointing one for us. I should say, you know, I think you all know and understand why we were working so hard on that plan is because that is what we wanted. We wanted to bring back as many of our students to do as much face-to-face as we could, but we also at the same time were monitoring. And there are four major things that I guess I want to focus on in terms of the contributors to that decision and change. The first one is case count. And I think you know what the nation's case count is. And I'm kind of reverting to my old hat for those of you who may not know, I was the Secretary of Health and Human Services, worked on Ebola and Zika. But this issue of case count and how it reflects community spread. The current case count at these very high numbers reflect community spread throughout the nation. And the thing about community spread is when you have that level of community spread, you don't exactly know where it's coming from. Your ability to do high quality contact tracing and to isolate so that each individual isn't passing it to more than one person. That's that it's that passage number that people talk a lot about. When you have these levels, you know you have deep spread in the community. And I consulted with a number of epidemiologists, asked them where did they think case count would be in September, October, November, so that we could understand where do we think we would be with regard to that issue. And I'm afraid as much as I wanted to hear different answers, I wasn't hearing answers that would indicate we would be at a level during this period of time that we could know what that case count. So when you combine the case count with the issue of testing, and the testing issue has two dimensions to it. Access to testing, which, you know, we actually had engaged and Dr. Alves had spent hours with all kinds of different companies to contract the testing capability so that we could have it. But that ability and that amount of testing is dependent on the number of cases. And so the strain on the testing system, and it's two things, they're getting the tests themselves, but there's the processing of the testing. And as we continue to see that time period that it was taking to get answers to the tests, one knows that is a very difficult contributor, and especially for a university where when we were going to do those testing, we'd want those hours within 24 and 48 hours. A third element, and that's not what we were seeing in terms of the nation's ability to deliver on that. The third issue that was one of the major contributors, and I'm going to list four, and there were other things happening, but these are four of the major things that shaped our decision. The fourth thing was the District of Columbia and the surrounding areas. The district actually hadn't announced, it announced the same day we announced, but the counties that surround us had all announced that they were going to have all of their schools go online. And when we think about our staff and faculty and our ability to deliver, that was something that was also going to be another complicating factor. And finally, the district announced the 14-day quarantine. And that is for 27 different states. And for those of you who are the parents of students who would be first years, the idea that you are going to send your son or your daughter to sit in a room for 14 days alone as part of this new experience was something that we felt was just a further complicating factor on top of these issues of the case counts. Because when you do those kinds of cases, the percentage of cases that we would have, even if we had at the low end, so even in just welcoming those 2,300 students back, which was 45% of our full residential capacity, even if we had anywhere from 1% to 6%, those were the estimates of what you would have case count, when we start reporting those cases, how was that going to feel to you all as parents and to our students themselves? And so these are the things that came together for our decision making, and our decision making to move online in terms of the courses, to move to a situation where we weren't inviting our first year students to the campus as we previously had. Those were what led to those decisions. And at the same time, we announced another decision, which was the decision for our community cares tuition fall discount. And that is related as much to the economic situation, which we don't spend a lot of time talking about because the health is driving the economics. But we know that for families across this country, as we continue to watch the unemployment numbers, as we continue to watch the numbers of small businesses that are going out of business, we know that that's impacting our parents and our families, and we're seeing that. And we had already increased our financial aid by $13 million in terms of that commitment, but we decided to take that next step. The only other thing, and it's not the topic for today, is all of that obviously has impacts on the university and the university finance. It's not the topic for our conversation today, but we wanted to make sure, and I wanted to spend a little time making sure you knew how we were thinking about that decision as we made it and the changes that we made. We're disappointed. We know that many of our students and our parents are as well, but it, I think, aligns with the principles. And the last piece I would say is we are going to do everything possible to make sure that the AU experience, that experience of high quality faculty, high quality student engagement, and the kinds of experiences that American University offers are going to be available to your students, even over the summer. Our summer program for our Institute of Women in Politics this summer, not the fall main program, had Nikki Haley, Joni Ernst, Jennifer Palmieri. We're going to continue to think about those ways, including engaging our alumni and making sure that there are communities, both in terms of for our students, but also many of the things that this university has to offer, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And so we are deeply focused on that as well. With that, Fanta, I'll turn things back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, President Burwell. Before you leave, there was I think one question that quickly came up that perhaps does go back to the economics that you've talked about from families. And it had to do with the question of, are there, what has been some of our approach to cutting down on cost? And so maybe you may want to speak about some of the actions that we've already taken as an institution.
I would be happy to. The first step that we took, and we took this step back in the spring as we were doing this, is that myself and the cabinet took a cut to our salaries. We started with that as a step. We froze any additional or new capital expenditures. We do not have a merit increase for this fiscal year that started for us July 1st for any employee except those who are 40,000 and under. As we've tried to take the steps that we're taking, we've tried to be very conscious of our impact in terms of the impact that we're having in terms of those kinds of changes. We have delayed, we have gotten rid of for this semester any contributions that we were doing to retirement for those who are 40,000 and above. And we are using a number of tools that we have never used before as they relate to our endowment. And so that is how we are working to make sure that we are able to be in a place, and I like to describe where we are as prudent and not panicked. Is this hard? Is this challenging? Do we have a tentative 6-day furlough in the new year? We may need to do that, but unlike many universities, especially our cohort universities here in Washington, D.C., at this point we have not had to do some of those things because we are using other tools at this time. The decisions that we've made may make changes to that, and it will be very dependent, in all honesty, on our retention of our students in terms of whether or not we'll need to take additional steps. And I think we need to be honest and transparent about that in terms of what we're doing, and we have each time we take steps, make sure that the community knows and understands those steps that we're taking.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know you had another schedule conflict, so I appreciate you being able to start us off with decision and context, because I think it's important for our families to have a little bit more of the nuances of what went into our decision making. So thank you, President Burwell.
Thank you. And to our families, I will just say, I look forward to the day, and there will be that day, when I'm going to get to see you all face to face on our campus. It will happen, it will come, and I look forward to it more than you can know.
Thank you. Thank you, President Burwell. With that said, we're going to jump in. I know, again, for our families, as President Burwell said, this was not the plan. I think for all of us who work with students, one of the joys that come from the work is being able to walk on a campus and run into students. It's being able to attend the events with students and hear from them. And it's also, frankly, being able to have FaceTime at the water cooler with your colleagues. Those touch points are touch points that are really incredibly important to community. But we, as was stated earlier, we have to be able to focus on the twin goals of health and safety and our core mission. And that is really where we are at all times in how we're making our decision. And as part of that decision, because it was really driven by the health and safety, the health and safety issues, I'm also hearing, as the days have gone by, that I think some of our parents, particularly our freshman parents of first-year students, have been talking in some cases of still having their students come to Washington. And I've even heard, some of the conversations about possibly having some students who would be staying at area hotels in doubles, perhaps, and so forth. As sort of the person who's the vice president for campus life and student affairs, I have to start by cautioning all of us. This is not, to me, this would be ill-advised. It would be ill-advised on lots and lots of levels. We know enough about student development, and we know enough about the maturation of students, that this idea of students who would be coming to Washington, not knowing this city, not knowing where they are, staying at local hotels, and that this would be considered part of the experience, I think, can be incredibly detrimental on a lot of levels. And so I do want to start by urging our families that what drove us here was health and safety, and those health and safety issues are not gone. And so to really think of having students come and stay in that manner is something that we would not advise. It's something we don't encourage families to do. That juniors and seniors who've had an opportunity to know DC in many ways have been at the university, that some of them are around the university or in the city, I understand that, but I would be very concerned about first-year students. And so let me start by cautioning all of us about that. I understand how for families, this decision was disappointing to all of us, but we really felt it was the best decision for both our students, our community, and also, frankly, our city, Washington, D.C. It's important that we have an obligation to this city. And it's important that we fulfill our obligation to this city in addition to fulfilling our mission. So I just wanted to start with that additional context, because I know that we've been receiving a lot of questions about, do you advise that, first-year students come still? And we're like, oh no, we would not advise that for the fall. This is not yet over. We're seeing the case counts go up and so forth. This would not be advisable. So just one of the first things. With that said, we are determined to do what we think is most important, and that is to make sure that we continue to create communities near and far, understanding that this will be a challenge for all of us, but I'm also I feel very confident that this is a challenge that we can all meet and that we can meet together. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of our ideas about how we're planning on looking at, forging communities from near and far. By involving our alumni, by being in partnership with our parents and families, and also by really, in many ways, leveraging our geography. With students who are all around the country, we know that we have critical masses of students in major cities. And so this idea that has come up for us is really thinking about AU in the cities, and thinking about, what would that look like for those who are in New York? What would that look like for those in Philadelphia, for those in San Francisco and others? And so that's something that we are looking at, and we'll be able to speak more about that as we get near the beginning of the semester. So that was one of the things that I wanted to just point out to our families. Also, again, our families come from within the US and outside of the US. And I know there's been a lot of questions about international students and what happens to international students. And we have families who are with us this evening who are internationals as well. And what I wanted to make sure is that, again, to reiterate that international students will be allowed to take classes online, and particularly with their immigration transfers, if they're already within the US, that will be something that will be facilitated. But more importantly, the International Student Scholar Services Office is in continuous conversations and providing information, and they're putting together webinars for international students and families. And we encourage our students and families who are internationals to please go to the website, knowing that there will be a couple of those webinars this week. And we want to make sure that you get as much timely information as possible. So that I know was one of the questions that came up, and I wanted to just start by making sure that we got to that. With that said, if we can kind of go to the sort of the next slide, please. So yes, I mean, universities are first and foremost about community, right? I mean, it is about community. It's about an academic community. It's about social communities. And so we will be looking at the various ways in which we'll be building community. And I know there had been some questions about what is the likelihood of helping families with students who will be in different parts of the country and who will not have the benefit of having that campus experience. How could they begin by forging community and creating connections? Through our various offices, we will be looking at lots of mechanisms for doing so. First year students, certainly with the AUX program, but also I want to make sure our sophomores, our juniors, and our seniors and our graduate students know that community is about all of us, and we'll be looking at community from that larger sense as well. But some of the questions is, will there be a virtual kickoff? Yes. We'll be looking at different series of virtual kickoffs. Some will be by communities, transfer students. It may look different for you, your virtual kickoff, and what will bring you together and bond you versus what it would be for our first year students and our upper class students as well. But there will be opportunities for those virtual kickoffs that are, some of it is regional, some of it is kind of broad based. And we will also be having our usual traditions, such as the first year and transfer convocation that will be coming up. What about clubs and performances and so forth? Yes, I think it goes without saying that the heartbeat of any institution has to be our students and the level of engagement of our students. And so our clubs and organizations are gearing up for the semester with programming and are trying to be as creative as possible with how to kind of create these virtual authentic communities. And I've always said that sometimes if you want to get to the best solutions, leave it to our students. Part of our job sometimes is to get out of their way, and in many ways give them, kind of provide the environment, and then let them go at it in kind of reimagining what it needs to be. And I'm always in awe of how our students really come up with fresh, innovative ideas. And so we've been in active engagement with them about how to think about that and how to challenge themselves to kind of create communities across the board. So there will be those opportunities to do so on a lot of levels. Can AU help us to organize Meet Other Eagles in our neighborhood? The answer is yes. We will be doing that in partnership with our alumni as well, because one of the benefits of Eagles is that we are everywhere. We are everywhere in the US and also overseas. And so we will want to leverage our alumni base as well as our family and parents base across this country to figure out how we can create sort of what I call these neighborhoods, these pods, these kind of community clusters. And it will look different in different places. Not one size fits all. And I think it's important for us to be flexible and for us to be able to do that. So what you're hearing from us is, yes, you'll be getting a lot more information about the ways we're going to be looking at community, and it will be evolving as the semester evolves. So stay tuned to that, and there'll be much more information coming your way around that piece of community. The other piece is what services will be available on campus? Great question, but also please know that because we know the vast majority of our community will be virtual, we will be talking particularly about what services are available virtually, because I think that's important. Our student health center will remain open, and our hours of operations are extensive. It's important to recognize, and our medical director will speak a little bit more about that. Our student health center is not an infirmary. And so it's important to understand the difference between what is a student health center and what is an infirmary, and we are not an infirmary. So we will talk a little bit more about that. The Bender Library will have services. The services will be online. They've really spent the entire summer scanning as many of the key readings and everything to make sure that those are accessible to our students wherever they are. And there'll be much more information forthcoming. There'll be limited study spaces that will be available through reservation for those who are local. The fitness center will absolutely remain closed. I think we've seen, as we hear around the country, the more you open quickly, some of the challenges with that and so forth. Shuttle services for those who will be in the area, there will be a modified schedule around the shuttle schedule. And then we will be making available some spaces for study and socializing. So those will be made available as we speak for what's available on campus. but also know that all of the things that we're offering around services and support are really going to be available virtually. That's really the key message I want you to understand. It is not that students will be missing out on those core services because they're not physically present. We have pivoted to what it means to be in a virtual space, and in many ways how to engage with our students and community through sort of the virtual platform. With that, I'm going to have my colleague Jessica talk about some of the academic instruction, with also reminding all of you that we will be holding specific webinar focused solely on the academic stuff. And those will be Thursday the 20th, we'll have a webinar, and then the 21st as well. So you will be receiving invitations to the webinar focused specifically on academics and what you can expect across the board with our faculty engagement. But I'll have Jessica speak to sort of give you a little bit of a picture of where we are with that.
Thank you. Again, my name is Jessica Waters. I'm the Dean of Undergraduate Education and Vice Provost for Academic Student Services. I'm also a double eagle. Dr. Ah is a triple eagle. I'm only a double eagle. I earned both my undergraduate degree and my law degree from AU. So the commitment to AU is long and runs deep. I often joke both of my kids went to the AU preschool. They're coming to AU for college, whether they like it or not. So we're in this one for the long haul. You know, I think the fact that so many of us care so deeply and have been involved with AU for so long, I hope gives you, as fellow parents, many of you, some level of comfort that you know, we are dedicated and just so invested in making sure that we provide a home for your students. Even though that home is going to look different than we were anticipating, it's critically important that we do that. So we've been asked a lot from students and from parents, you know, what's going to be different? What have you learned from the spring? What are the lessons learned? How will my student be engaged? How do we make sure that our students can be successful in an online learning environment? And we all went through the ringer in the spring, right, across the country and across the world, and had to pivot really quickly. You know, we moved an entire campus from in-person to offline and online in the span of 6 days. And like it or not, we have a lot of lessons learned from that. We learned very quickly how to take our expert content from our faculty members and our classes and get it online. And we've spent the entire summer refining that. We actually had an incredibly robust summer experience at AU with many students electing to take online classes with us who had taken classes with us in the spring. So our faculty have spent the whole summer exploring new platforms for online engagement and thinking through, how do I take my expertise, how do I take my class content and deliver it in that top-notch quality that we know our AU students and families expect. And you know, we're asked sometimes, is there a silver lining of this, right? If we know that our students won't be in person, like, are there silver linings? Are there new things that are happening that we can be excited about? And I think the answer is yes. I was talking to a bunch of our science faculty today and saying, like, how are you going to do labs? Like, what's this going to look like? And you know, they too were like, oh, well, we have a chemistry of cooking class and we have cooking experiments for them to do at home. And then for the astronomy class, we're getting stargazing charts. And in my chem class, we're having each student get a $19 microscope so that we can do those labs at home. In physics, they're actually sending physics lab kits to students, right? So we see our faculty engaging in that really interesting way. I think another silver lining is that with the online environment, you know, AU is so well known for bringing in expert speakers on every topic that you can imagine, whether it's in the arts or the sciences or political science or international relations, because our alumni network is so deep that we're able to do that. That's only heightened now, right? Whereas we might have gone to guest lecturers or brought in people in the past, that takes a lot of planning and a lot of manipulating very important people's schedules, right? If you're going to bring in a senator or something like that. Now they're really willing to pop in for a 15-minute Zoom chat, right, with the students in your class. And we've really been leveraging that. Just earlier this week, I was talking with 80 of our local alums, all of whom went through the AU experience and are now working in the DC area in the arts or in on Capitol Hill or in law. And all of these alums said, can we come to class, right? Can we come talk to them and talk about what our AU experience was like? Can we join a book club with the students? Can I give a guest lecture? So we're really leveraging all of that. So when I think about silver linings, I think that as much as we all wish we could be in person, faculty creativity has really been unleashed in this time. And I think we're going to see that a lot with our fall classes. So when we think about engagement, we're still keeping steady, for example, our small class sizes. So many of our classes are at 19 students or fewer. All of our incoming students take our AUX class, which is our transition to college class, the American University Experience. All of those are 19 students or fewer. Our complex problem seminars taught by our top faculty who actually compete to teach in that program, all 19 students or fewer. So we're keeping those really small class sizes so faculty can continue to have that robust engagement with our students across the university. So when we think about engagement, think about the different platforms we're using, think about the faculty creativity being unleashed, the new opportunities to do science or art or other disciplines in different ways that we wouldn't have imagined before, and then the access to the speakers and the alums who are just so willing to engage with our students. Importantly, as we've been doing all of this work and we've been training our faculty all summer about how to use Canvas and how to use Blackboard and how to use Zoom and breakout rooms and how do you do polls in Zoom and all those creative ways, we need to do the same for our students. So we are putting together, next week, for example, we have an online learner summit for our faculty and staff across the university where we're spending the day dedicated to, how do we make sure all of our students are set up for success? All of the work we've done since March to perfect our online learning, bringing that learning together for all of the faculty and staff in our community to make sure we're pulling those resources together. On top of that, we're putting together an online orientation for all of our students, an orientation to online learning, and building out a hub of resources, videos, top 10 tips, and other resources that students can access to think through how can I be a successful online learner. We've also, and I think this gets to perhaps our next slide, have really been working through what does academic support look like, right? When we think about, we have the classroom experience, we have our top-notch faculty, but we know that so many of our students rely so heavily on the other academic supports, whether that's an academic advisor, whether that is a tutor, whether that is the services in our writing center or our quantitative support lab. All of those offices have spent the summer making sure that we are at a capacity to provide 100% of services virtually in that individualized way that we have always provided for our AU students. So, you need writing support, it's there. You need quantitative support, it's there. Our academic coaches have been trained all summer to pivot to help students in an online learning environment. So they're actively working on what does time management in an online learning environment look like? What do you do about Zoom fatigue, right? I know many of us have that. So all of our support offices have been working on this piece all summer as well to make sure we're backing up that classroom experience. We can probably move to the next slide. Yeah, and then the question of, the things that AU is so known for, right? Internships and studying abroad and these experiential education activities. What if I'm in the honors program? What if I'm in the community-based research scholars program? What if I'm in the university college? Will those things continue? And the answer is yes. I mean, they will look different, right? They will look different than they have in the past, but in some ways, again, even more exciting. So we've been working with employers across DC and across the country to think through virtual internships. So many of us have had to pivot to online working and learn those new skills and learn how to engage in that way. And we're going to be making sure our students get those opportunities as well, and they learn those skills as the work world has changed dramatically. So those opportunities for online internships are robust. We've also been working with local employers to determine whether internships are available in person for our students who are in the DC area, particularly our junior and senior students. And employers have really signaled that they're willing to do it. Importantly, we're working closely with those employers to make sure it will be safe. right? We'll want employers to certify that they are taking precautions so that social distancing is happening in any office, for example. But we're working with local employers in DC to make sure we have those opportunities for our junior and senior students. And the same with our experiential education. So a great example, I think, is our community-based research scholars and our students who engage in that work. Many of them have traditionally worked with local nonprofits, or they've worked with local public schools. And we've already set up that our scholars will be able to do that tutoring for DC public school students online, right? So they'll have that same type of engagement, and frankly, it's even more necessary now in places like DC public schools. So we're making sure that our students who are so invested in the community and continuing that work will be able to do so. So, you know, across the board, when we're thinking about our faculty, we're thinking about our classes, we're thinking about academic support, we're thinking about internships, all of those pieces coming together in a really rich way that's different, but also exciting. And then lastly, sort of the question of, hey, internet connections, right? What do I do? We recognize that that this can be a barrier for some students. So if your student is having trouble with having a reliable computer or a reliable internet connection, you'll see on the PowerPoint the email for the tech task force. And that task force was specifically set up to deal precisely with this type of issue. So individualized support for any student who's experiencing computer or internet access issues. And then we've asked a lot about the question of the academic calendar and different options that might be available to students. One of the things that we're really working hard to do is to provide as steady and as constant an experience for our students as we can. We want our students and our families to have certainty about the academic calendar and to be able to plan accordingly. So the first day of classes remains the same. The last day of classes remains the same. The final exam schedule remains the same. Really important that we provided that continuity for our students. Likewise, when we think about when classes are offered, so what time of day, we are holding all of that steady. So if your course was supposed to meet at 5 o'clock on Tuesdays, it will still meet at 5 o'clock on Tuesdays. It will be online, but it will still meet at the same time so that class schedules don't get messed up. We have also kept all of our academic deadlines. So you'll see on our academic calendar, there are specific deadlines for when you can add a class, right? So in the first 10 days of the semester, you can still add or drop a class. There are dates for a withdrawal deadline, so when you can withdraw from a class, when you can change a grade type option, so to elect a pass-fail class or a class that's graded on an A through F scale. All of those dates are outlined in our academic calendar, and we're planning to hold to them so that everyone has certainty and can make the decisions that are best for them. So in this time of a ton of change, we're holding as much constant as we can. And then many people have asked about deferring, particularly our incoming students have said like, hey, like what should I do? Should I take a semester off? And I'd really encourage any student or family thinking about that to connect with us, to really talk through like, what does that look like? What does it mean if my student decides to take a semester or a year off? You know, I've joked around a bit, like, you know, no one's traveling to France, right? Like, you know, no one's going on that whirlwind trip before their, you know, first year of college. So think through, like, is there a meaningful experience that my student would be having if they didn't enroll in classes at AU, right? And importantly, balancing that with continuing to make academic progress. We at AU are committed to making sure that students graduate on time, right? Recognizing the financial commitment that our families and students make. And taking a semester or a year off can really interfere with that plan. So before any decision like that is made, please do connect with us, connect with academic advisors so we can talk through all of the options. But you can see on the admissions website our deferral policy, which again has remained steady, and students who are thinking about a possible deferral or temporary leave should talk to their academic advisor and can also contact the Office of Admissions.
Going back to what Jessica was talking about, it's been our experience that sometimes I think there's a lot of assumptions that are being made either from students as they're thinking about, taking a leave and or a deferral, that having that conversation with the academic advisor at minimum can clarify a lot of things that can inform that decision. And so I think that touch point is an important touch point. Now we're going to move to billing and financial aid. We know that there's been quite a few questions around billing and financial aid, and we want to make sure that we're all on the same page as to where we are with that. And so perhaps we'll start, Jonnel, with some of the billing pieces and questions.
Yep, thank you, Fanta. So if any of you have been granted proxy access, which we hope you have been, and you can take a look at your students' account activity in their student portal and the Eagle service, you'll see that their fall bill has now been adjusted. So we have already reduced the tuition by 10%. For those students that didn't have the housing and dining charges, they have been taken off your account. The sports center fee has been waived and the student activity fee has been reduced. Now, there are probably still the two charges on the account that students and families are asking about, and that is the UPass. For the students that are outside of the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and they won't be using the metro or bus system here in the area, a waiver will be available soon on the housing website, which is what the address is here on the slide. Once the waiver is posted, we're going to ask students to file that waiver by September 21st, which also coincides with the last day to add and drop classes. So we want you to be mindful of that deadline. Same with health insurance. That fee is on your student's account right now. And if your student is covered through another healthcare plan, you are eligible to submit a waiver request to have that charge taken off your account. And the date to do that is September 18th. So let's be mindful of that as well. If you have any questions about your bill, AU Central is always a great place to start. We work really, really collaboratively with our colleagues all over campus. So if we need to help you get in touch with the right person in housing or financial aid, we're more than happy to do that. We do have our staff answering phones remotely, aucentral@american.edu. And we also have chat, email, so all those things. So we're here to answer your questions. If we can go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about refunds. So for those students and families who have paid their bill already and you have a credit balance on your account, our Office of Student Accounts is working diligently to issue your refund. And the first refunds will start to be processed later this week. So it's really important, if you want to get your refund sooner rather than later, you may want to consider signing up for direct deposit. There's a website that you can see that shows you where you need to go in and sign up for the direct deposit. If you don't sign up for ACH direct deposit, a paper check will be mailed to the address that we have on file. So again, your student should be encouraged to make sure that if we were issuing a paper check to you, we have the right address on file for you. For our international students, I want to throw this in. If you are anticipating a refund and you have sent your payment via wire transfer, the opportunity for us to issue your refund via wire transfer is available. If you've asked about this in the past, we just have new guidance on this. So please send AU Central an updated request and we'll work with you to get the information we need to issue your wire transfer refund. For those families that have already had 529 prepayment plans posted to your account, those funds will be part of your refund that gets issued starting on Friday. So we are encouraging you, if you have those 529 plan funds coming back to you, reach out to your plan to ask specifically what you should do with those funds. If we haven't received your check yet or it hasn't posted, I would encourage you to send us an email at aucentral@american.edu. If we can, we will, obviously if your refund goes out on Friday and we get your 529 check after that, we're not gonna post it to your account. We're gonna try to get your checks shredded and have you work with your provider. So I think that is what we have from the billing side, and I'm gonna hand it to Shirleyne now to talk about the financial aid piece.
Hello, everyone, and I understand that there are many questions. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Shirleyne McDonald, and I will try to answer as many of your questions as possible. One of the major misconceptions that I think our students and families continue to have is that the assumption that because we've changed the means or the mode in which we're providing instruction and gone completely distance, that somehow it would impact financial aid or financial aid eligibility. And changing the modality of instruction actually has no impact on a student's eligibility for aid. Having said that, though, I do want to point out that there are some things to keep in mind. We assume, even though our students may not be living on our campuses, that our students will incur living expenses for the fall 2020 semester. And so we have not made any adjustments to our students' cost of attendance, simply because we understand that our students and families continue to incur costs for books, for living, for food. And so if you're receiving financial aid that's to help assist and defray the cost of not only tuition, but the other components within our cost of attendance, that money remains available for you to assist you in covering those other costs. So that's the very first thing I want to clarify for my students and families. The other question that we are getting a lot is, we understand that there's been a 10% discount in tuition. What impact will that have on my aid eligibility? And for most students, there isn't an impact. But for those students who are receiving what we call tuition restricted or tuition based institutional grant or scholarship funding, no combination of those funds can exceed the tuition that has been charged. And so the only time that we've made a reduction to any type of funding that we've provided is if the combination of AU grant or AU scholarship money exceeds tuition. And the change would solely be for the amount of the discount. And so those are the only instances in which funding would be reduced. And so that's really what I wanted to stress to my students and families. Now, the very last piece, every student's circumstance, every family circumstance, especially in these times, are different. I encourage all of you to please reach out to the financial aid office. We have our contact information right there on the screen. So in case you're unaware, every student has a financial aid advisor. These are extremely busy and challenging times for everyone, but we will make every effort to reach out. And if you have questions, please know that we continue to work remotely and virtually to answer those questions. By going to the contact us option on our website, you simply need to put the first letter of the student's last name and the direct telephone number of the financial aid counselor will be provided. So please give us a call if you continue to have questions or concerns.
The next piece that we wanted to quickly get to is around some of the physical and mental health, and there's been some questions around that piece as well. Our counseling center will be made available, and for students who would be from a distance because of licensing pieces that have to do with practicing therapy, there is a case manager that would be able to work with students remotely. We are also enhancing our platform to provide lots of different resources and for students to be able to work with counselors and the different resources that are available to our students. So wanted to make sure that you were aware of that as well. Karyn, do you mind please going to the next slide? So one of the questions that keep coming up, and I don't know if Dr. Reitman has been able to join us as of yet.
Yes, I'm here.
But it's the question around COVID testing. So I would ask Dr. Reitman to please speak a little bit about that for those who will be local.
Okay. So the first question here is, can my off-campus student get COVID testing at AU? What about quarantine support? So we will have testing available for basically any student that's in the DC region. The testing is going to be on campus. It says here at the Student Health Center, but actually it'll probably be in a site just outside of the Student Health Center, just because we're trying to keep some of this testing from an infection control standpoint, keep this outside of the indoors part of the health center as much as possible. And I think it's also important to remember that the health center actually has been open this entire time, and we will remain open to any students that are in the area. That said, it's important to also reinforce that the Student Health Center is a outpatient clinic. We do not have a quarantine support available, and we're not an infirmary where we can actually house students if they're ill. Unfortunately, we just don't have the ability, and we're not certified or accredited to do that type of thing. But any type of services that students need that they had gotten in the past from the Student Health Center, we will be definitely open to provide all those services for our students. There shouldn't be any kind of change or pause in care there. Once again, as long as the students are here and in Washington, D.C. Next slide.
And to emphasize what Dr. Reitman talked about, with the Department of Health and these questions around, isolation and quarantine, I think it's important to understand that quarantine and isolation can happen within the housing that the students are in. Because I think there's been a lot of questions about that. Would you have to, can my students move to a different place? The practice does talk about the fact that if a student needs to be quarantined, they could be quarantined within their existing housing. And so I just wanted to come back to that question because it's come up a few times.
Okay, some questions that also have come up over the last few days about the AU health insurance plan, the Care First plan, and can students keep it if they want to? So it just, I think I just talked a little bit about before with Jonnel from AU Central. If students are on their parents' insurance or on their family's insurance and they do not want to purchase the Care First insurance plan, they don't need to purchase it, but they're going to have to waive out, okay, just the way they would if they were coming to DC. And once they submit the waiver, and if they meet the criteria for the waiver, it can be removed from the bill. So this is whether or not a student is actually going to be in DC or not, you must complete this waiver process. And there will be a place in the waiver process to indicate whether or not the student will be in DC or is going to be at home. And your student needs to make sure that he or she fill that part out. Students who want to actually enroll in the insurance plan, and it is an excellent insurance plan and is not expensive compared to most other insurances, all they need to do is just complete the process in their portal. They'll be able to download their card onto their phone, and they will already have had the bill for the coverage put onto their student bill. The policies are active as of 2 days ago, so they should be set there.
Housing, again, a lot of questions have come up about, for students who were given housing, what has happened to that? We are basically canceling all on-campus housing. And when we do resume for the spring, assuming everything goes in the right direction, then we will be communicating with students well in advance to again confirm that they do have an interest in housing, and then we'll go through the housing selection process and we will make that as efficient as possible. So the only students really right now who would be on campus is a very, very limited number of students, and it's through our emergency housing. And it would be perhaps students who may be housing insecure. It may be students who are international students who will not be able to go home given the distance and travel, and travel difficulties and so forth. But those are really the only students. We've been hearing from several of you, about our colleagues at Georgetown and GW housing students, and I think there's a lot of confusion about that as well. I'm in regular touch with my colleagues at those institutions through the consortium. We work very closely together, and we all know each other quite well. And those institutions too, with what has happened with COVID-19 and the number of cases that have increased, have really changed what their approach has been to on-campus residents for housing as well. But that will be the process for housing and housing selection. And for any student who fits into the category of the exception for emergency housing, there is a process, there's an application process, and then there's a committee that will review the application accordingly and respond as soon as possible. Can we move to the next? For students with signed leases, for off-campus, what can we do? There's the updated resources on our off-campus housing website. We understand that this is very frustrating. And again, we wish that the decision could be made earlier, but all of the indications up to our decision point, we're indicating that we were moving in the direction that we had anticipated. And again, as President Burwell said, after July 4th, we started to see some changes, and then it became really much more pronounced. Just a few days before we made an announcement with the quarantine and everything else, was really when things kind of took a turn very rapidly. And there will be a webinar that will be hosted on August 5th with a representative from the Office of General Counsel, as well as the DC Office of Tenant Advocate, around leases and what might be some strategies around that. So more details will be made available on the housing website. Can we go to the next slide, please? Please move to the next. We've talked about emergency housing. What happens for packages? If you've already shipped your packages because you were moving in, we will be returning those to the senders in the coming weeks. And if you shipped it directly through Amazon, we ask that you please work to cancel your order with them, as we will not be able to provide, or we're unable to provide any tracking around those pieces. And if you've not shipped, we ask certainly to refrain from shifting at this point. And if you've stored your items with UPS, which has been the case with our sophomores and perhaps upper class students, UPS will contact you directly to talk about the options for storage or shipping. Next slide, please. So what can parents and family do to help support students this fall? I think there are lots of ways, and I think there are a couple of things that I will say related to that. For those of you who have met me through orientation and so forth, you hear me talk a lot about the importance of partnership. It is really a partnership. We value that partnership with families as we try to really, in many ways, position all of our students to be successful. And part of that partnership means that we will be looking looking at virtual communities. And we talked about some of the communities in different regions being one of those, but also through our student organizations and through our student engagement, finding other ways for communities to be formed. We also know that in order for parents and families to help support students this fall, we have to give you more information. The more information we can arm you with, the better partner you are to us. So we will be looking at a series of ongoing webinars during the first weeks of classes. That will be webinars for parents. As Jessica mentioned, as we're looking at how do we help support our students for online learning? How do we help our students know how to be more effective with online learning? We also then need to be doing something similar with families about how do you support your student in online learnings? What are some things that can help you feel like you're being a better support to your student? So stay tuned for a series of webinars that we'll be organizing, and you will be getting information through AU Parent at american.edu from Karyn and the rest of the team. But we know that as the semester starts, we will be on that journey with you as we all start the semester as well. So stay tuned for that. Karyn, anything else? Yes, the question has come up already. What is the plan for spring 2021? Great question. Again, we, as President Burwell said, as we all said, our hope is really to have a residential experience in the blended instruction made possible for the spring. Again, we're going to continue to watch the conditions. We are hopeful that we will all do what it takes to, in many ways, curb sort of cases and so forth. And so all of our operation decisions will be based on the kind of three factors that President Burwell talked about. Where is health and safety? What's our core mission? And what are we learning as we move forward, and for both the nation and our city? So stay tuned, and we know that it's important for us to make those decisions as soon as possible, and we're quite aware of that. But there'll be more information forthcoming about the spring 2021 semester once we catch our breath and we have everyone off and ready for the fall. So pretty much a couple of things. Really continue to submit your questions to auparents@american.edu. I think it goes without saying that we will be looking at those very closely, and we'll be responding in lots of different ways. We will be continuing to increase our frequently asked questions as we answer your questions. We will not hesitate when we see the for the need for more webinars, because we do believe these face-to-face kind of virtual are important in addition to the memos that you're receiving. And then also making sure that you have all of the key resources that are available for you. But more than anything else, I think it goes without saying that we're in this together. And we know that, as we begin the semester, there will be lots of different touch points. Our ability to communicate and to communicate with speed is going to be incredibly important. Our ability to hear and to anticipate is going to be essential as we move forward with the fall semester. As Jessica said, we've learned an incredible lot with the spring, and I think it's been really enriching learning on many levels. But also what it has done is that it has really sort of in many ways unleashed the energy of our campus community to kind of reimagine some things. Things that I think, initially were perhaps more difficult to do, like being able to have quick access to some of the key resources because of the pressure of time and location and so forth. Now those borders have been erased in a way that we can leverage them much more than we would before. So there's been a lot of learning in this process, and we look forward to working with you as the days and weeks come by. And so with that, I think we're literally 2 minutes over time, and I'm mindful of your time. And so we very, very much appreciate you giving us some of your time. And just to finish off, I want to thank my colleagues who were able to join us this evening. Very much appreciate them joining us. And then do remember that for our international students, there are webinars coming up. We will be having webinars dedicated specifically to the academic component. And then we will be also probably organizing a webinar around how we're working on communities, how we're working to forge communities for our campus near and far. So stay tuned to those coming up. And then lastly, I will leave again with my cautionary tales, particularly for our first year students and families. The idea of sending your student to Washington when this decision was made around some of those key criteria is not the right time for that. We really do need to work in partnership, and I think it's important for me to be quite upfront about some concerns that would raise for you all. Thank you.